Hi. Going through some of my survival gear here, and this is one of my fire kits. Emergency fire kit, by the way. I'd use a lighter if I could, but there may be times when you can't use a lighter, and it's a good idea to put together a little kit. And in this kit here, this particular kit, by the way, I have several of these. I have a little tin here that has some char cloth in it. And also here I have a plastic Fresnel lens for starting a fire with the sun, like a magnifying glass. You've probably done that as a kid. And also, excuse my throat here, also a small ferro rod I have attached here, and piece of high carbon steel, and that of course is for striking flint and making fires, in which Tim has a great video up, by the way, on the Blue Ridge channel about using flint and steel, and we'll go through that in a couple of minutes here. And I have some various things in here. I have some fat wood shavings and a little bit of magnesium mixed with a charball, and some Vaseline balls. I think Tim goes through that too. And a little bit more fat wood. And a fat wood is an extremely resinous wood from pine, and kind of burns like a match. Burns for a long time. And it's good for your tinder. And I have a bunch of flint chips. The ferro rod. Well, this is one of my ferro rods, and I want to talk to you for just a moment about this. This is a ferrocerium rod. In other words, it's iron, plus it has some, well, rare earth metals that is mixed with it, and it's for sparking a fire. And I'm sure you're aware of the ferro rod, and Tim demonstrates that also in one of his videos. But I wanted to talk to you about these for a second. About 15 years ago, they came out with a new type of ferro rod. This one is basically iron with a little bit of rare earth minerals in it, and it throws a very hot spark. The newer ferro rods, they actually call them mish metal, are made a little bit different, and they still call them ferro rods, and there is some iron in there, but there's also more magnesium than the old ferro rods, and that will create a larger spark, and that spark will actually burn a little bit longer to help you get your tinder going. So they're softer than the old ferro rods, and they can be used up a little quicker because they do throw quite a shower of sparks. So there's actually two types. We refer to them as ferro rods anyway. I love these things, and I'll tell you why. I'm a firm believer that if you have a sharp knife and a way to make fire out there in the wilderness without burning 10,000 calories, like you would with a bow drill, a hand drill, a bamboo saw, or a fire plow, if you can find a way to make fire without burning a lot of calories, well, you're one step up. You have an advantage. And the ferro rod is the way to go. So the thing that I'm always puzzled about with these things is they disappear. Now you're there trying to get your fire going. You got your little bird's nest all set up. You spark your tinder, stick it in your bird's nest, and you lay this on the ground. And you blow your bird's nest into a flame, you stick it into your kindling, and everything's fine and dandy until you go back to look for this, and it's gone. I don't know where they go. Perhaps they sprout little bitty legs, walk off into the bush by themselves, and I imagine there's an alternative universe somewhere where these things are stacked up like cordwood, because they do disappear. And that's why I have a lot of them. I probably have 20 of these things stashed around, several in my truck. Of course, a lot of them in my emergency fire kits. and my bug out gear, and my fishing gear, and my tactical gear. But I like these things. And we'll, again, Tim has a video up demonstrating the use of the ferro rod. And going through my flint, to use with flint and steel, this is my favorite piece of flint. Do you have a favorite piece of flint? Probably not, but you might someday. One of the problems with using flint and steel is that the flint gets dull. After a while, after you strike it a bunch of times, it gets dull. And I'm going to show you in part 2 of this video how to sharpen your flint. We'll do a little flint knapping. Not the type of knapping that you would do if you were making an arrowhead, a cutting utensil, or a spearhead or something, but just enough to sharpen your flint. And I do have an assortment, a variety of flints that I have with me all the time. But this is a piece of high carbon steel. And what happens when you strike a flint with this is that the sharpness of the flint will actually scrape off minute particles of the steel. And the carbon, because of the friction of striking, will ignite. And it will ignite the steel. So you get sparks. These sparks are actually molten steel, molten high carbon steel. And of course they get trapped in your tinder, and it begins to glow, and you get a little ember, and you blow that into a flame. But again, these get very dull. So in part 2 of this, I'm going to go outside and show you how to sharpen this. We'll use something called a hammerstone, which is just a heavy rock, by the way. And if I were to shape this into an arrowhead, I would use a much larger and heavier hammerstone. That would be one of the things I would do to shape this, because I will be knocking off pieces of this rock, this flint, by hammering in and down. When you hammer in, you cause fractures. When you hammer down, you peel off those little pieces of flint. By the way, you don't want to do this in the house. It gets little flint chips all over, and they're extremely sharp. And you step on one and you'll know it, or you have a pet around or something that'll step on one. Not a good thing. Again, I like this flint, my favorite flint, because it has a very nice platform up here where I can put a piece of char cloth or whatever tinder I might be using, but it needs to be sharpened. So I'll go outside here in a moment, and we'll sharpen up this piece of flint in part 2.